And so it's really important that we can have it in the evening. But then after that, I want you to know that if we share the recording, it's only going to be the audio, not seeing people's faces. Okay, so it's all yours, Roberta, and thank you again.
Perfect. Thank you. No problem. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here today. So thank you so much for reaching out to our department and asking for a presenter. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself first off. My name's Roberta. I've been a constable with the Vancouver Police since September of 2021, and I'm currently assigned to District 2, Team 10. So District 2 kind of encapsulates as far north as basically up to the water, and as far south to Broadway, as far east to Boundary, and as far west to about Cambie Street. So my district is fairly large, and we have a very wide variety of people that we interact with during the day. And yeah, so I've been to many calls for domestic disputes. That's almost daily occurrence in my district and in Vancouver. And so I just like to start off by talking about what is intimate partner violence versus domestic violence and why we might use a different term. So intimate partner violence is kind of an updated term from domestic violence. So domestic violence kind of suggests that it's just conflict within the home. It's just between a man and woman who are married. And whereas the term intimate partner violence is a little bit more inclusive now. So it encapsulates people who are married, people who are dating, regardless of the length of the relationship and whether or not they live together. So in a lot of domestic situations, the couple may not live together. They may have separate residences and they may not be together anymore, but we still have to take these calls as calls between the relationship of those two people. So it also includes people who are in a previous relationship but are no longer together, and of course encapsulates LGBTQ plus couples and however people identify. So it kind of shifts it from just straight married couples who live together to a wide variety of relationships. So using this term, it helps us identify the type of investigation that we need to proceed with, as well as the steps that we need to take to ensure public safety and the best interest of the family. So there are lots of different calls that can become intimate partner violence. And it doesn't just mean somebody's been assaulted. There are a wide variety of criminal code offenses that can become what we would consider to be an intimate partner violence file. So some of those would be sexual assault, harassing communications. When, say, somebody has an ex-partner and they are constantly communicating with them in a way that is unwanted by that other party, we would consider that to be an intimate partner file because they had that relationship. Uttering threats, threatening your partner, previous or current, is a criminal code offense and something that we take seriously and would be coded under that umbrella. Trespassing, so entering someone's home unwanted, choking or strangulation, forcible confinement, not allowing somebody to leave, is a criminal code offense. Intimidation, and of course, breaching conditions would all be considered part of intimate partner violence. And I'll be talking a little bit more about conditions later. So the relationship between parents and children, relatives, friends, roommates living together are not considered intimate partner violence, even though those things are happening within a home. The intimate partner violence is really between people who are having an intimate relationship. So if a parent and child are arguing en route to that call, it would be coded for us as a domestic dispute, but it would not fall under that umbrella. That would be, say an uncle or like two brothers assaulted each other. That wouldn't be considered intimate partner violence. That would be considered assault. So just to clarify, if anybody has any questions about what is coded as what and how we treat different instances that may be happening within a home. Is there any questions about that? Oh, sorry, Marilyn, I don't think you have your mic on.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't ask you before if it was okay to call you Roberta or if I should say Constable Roberta. I
Oh,
apologize for that.
Roberta's fine. No
Yeah.
problem.
Okay. My question was about when you say the domestic dispute, you said that that is domestic violence or no, right? What is it that what is the meaning of domestic dispute?
So when we're getting called, when we're being assigned a call, usually it comes in, we have different codes for different types of calls. And so a domestic dispute would be anything from two people arguing really loudly and somebody's worried about public safety to there's an assault happening. So it's very broad because we're not at the call yet. So it's hard for us to say unless we get specific information from those parties as to what's happening. The term domestic violence is kind of the outdated term with regards to incidents happening between two people in a relationship, either past or present. So instead of using the term intimate or domestic violence, we would use the term intimate partner violence to kind of code that now.
Okay.
So when we're going to a call, it usually comes in over our call dispatch as a domestic dispute in progress. And then when we get there, we can kind of see what we're dealing with. Does that make a little bit more sense?
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
just that yeah.
No problem, no problem. I want to be as clear as possible.
Yeah, I know you have a handout or PowerPoint. If you at any moment wants us to share that, I know Jesus has it to put it up in case if you need it.
Okay, perfect.
So,
Yeah,
so,
they're
so
just kind of the main points of my presentation. But I'll leave it to Jesus. I'm not sure how to share things, so.
no worries. So, Roberta, one thing. So, in order to get intimate domestic violence, uh, needs to be a past or present intimate relationship.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
no problem. Okay, so I'll talk now, if there's not any other questions, I'll talk now about what happens when somebody calls 911 and our procedures as police when somebody calls 911. So as to who can call 911, anybody can call 911 if they feel that their personal safety is being threatened. So anybody in the house can call 911 if they don't feel safe. It doesn't have to be one of the people who is in the relationship with regards to the incident. I would definitely advise teaching young children how to call 911 and what to say to the call dispatchers. These situations can be very stressful, especially for young children. And if they feel like they're seeing their parents argue and they feel like things are becoming unsafe, it might be a good idea to go over with children knowing their phone number, knowing their address, knowing their full name and birth date, and being able to describe what's going on. One of the first questions that somebody will be asked when they call 911 is if they need police, fire, or ambulance, and they can ask for the appropriate people they're trying to reach. So in this case, they would say police, and then they would be directed further as to what kind of information they would need to provide. So we definitely advise teaching children just how to do that and when is the time to call. So it's always good to go over that kind of stuff with children. Our dispatchers are highly trained to stay calm and get information from the caller as quickly as possible to dispatch the appropriate department as quickly as possible. So, and it should be noted as well that even if police aren't asked specifically to go to a call, sometimes we do get those calls downstream to us anyways. Say if somebody is hurt and they call for ambulance, but as their call taker is listening to the situation, they may contact police to attend as well, because the scene needs to be safe for their members too. Same thing with the fire department. We will often show up to calls before them to make sure that their scene is safe. So if there is an assault, ambulance will call us because there needs to be an investigation and they need to make sure that their members are not being assaulted as well. So that is something important to note for families, that there's always the chance, even if they haven't specifically called for police, that we may still attend just for other departments' safety. So our police response for a 911 call for a domestic dispute can be really varied. En route, we'll be able to query who's calling, who is associated to that residence, and also read past reports of police interaction. And this just helps us better understand the people involved, the situation that we're going to, and give us just a little bit more context about what it is that's happening. Of course, no two calls are ever the same, and it might be completely different circumstances, but oftentimes being able to access that information really helps us prepare what we're going to be dealing with. And it helps us understand, okay, these people, they might, struggle with certain things, and it just gets us mentally prepared. And it's also for safety as well. We want to know everything that's going on in terms of safety issues. Does somebody have a violent history? Is somebody really at risk? Does somebody have an illness? And I'll get more into that just in a second here. So calls coded as domestic dispute can be extremely varied. A domestic dispute can just be two people arguing really loudly and somebody became fearful for everyone's safety and called 911. It can be somebody is being assaulted. It can be a past report where a dispute has happened and now somebody has decided to call police to report it. So it's very varied, and we have to be prepared for that as police. As I said before, no two calls are the same. Maybe we've attended a residence before and we're getting a call for a similar circumstance, but it really could be completely different when we get there. People are different every day, so we can't make assumptions while we're driving to these types of calls. We can be familiar with the parties involved and can have a sense of what the issues may be and have solutions ready. That often does happen where we're familiar with people and we understand what struggles they have, and it's really just about problem solving. But we always have to assess the scene when we get there and take those steps once we have all of the information. So some other things we might be querying or asking over the radio on the way. One of the big ones is, does anybody have conditions or protection orders in place? And I'll be talking more about those in details later. But those are really important to note. Is somebody in the home that's not supposed to be there? And that would make them arrestable quite quickly. Or does somebody have a protection order that now they're in the presence of somebody who might be putting them at risk? Are there any children present? That is a really important one for police because the safety of children is paramount, and we want to make sure that we're taking steps to consider the child's safety, but also their mental health and their view of safety, because these calls are very stressful for children. How many people are in the home? If there's a lot of people that are inside the home, we want to make sure that we as police also have proper resources if there's going to be multiple people on scene. Does anybody have access to any weapons? That's very important for us because we also need to be safe as police when we go to these types of calls. And is anybody in the home CFRO positive, which is the Canadian Firearms Registry? We want to know if somebody has firearms registered to them and whether or not they're in the home. That's a really big one. All of these are important for us to consider when we're coming to the call where there might be intimate partner violence. Does anybody have any questions about that?
I have another question, but I don't know if it's about that. Like, I wanted to know how how percentage, how many the intimate partner, intimate violence situations or phone calls do you get that are, let's say, immigrant people? Do you know that? Do you have stats about that?
I don't have those stats on hand, but it really is quite varied who we go to calls with. It's a wide variety of people all across the board. I can't really say it seems like it's any one group that struggles with this. And I think it also depends on the demographics of the district. So I can say I feel like, just from my own personal experience, that I deal with a lot of really different types of people. And there are going to be some people who maybe struggle a little bit more, where we interact with them a little bit more, but it is a wide variety of people, I would say.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to know if that information was there or not.
No problem.
Yeah.
All right, so what happens when police are on scene? The main focus when we're on scene is public safety. We have to make sure that everybody involved is safe and separated. So upon locating the parties involved, we typically separate people so everybody gets a chance to tell their side of the story. Just because somebody has called 911 and is giving us information and saying something's happening, they're not necessarily correct, and that person might actually be the problem. So we have to make sure that we go into these situations as unbiased as possible and get proper information. I've definitely gone to calls where somebody has called 911 and they think that because they're the one that called 911 that they're right. And after speaking to everybody involved, we realized, no, that person was actually being the issue the entire time. They just called 911 first. So that's something we have to take into consideration. We also ask parties to separate from each other so people can speak more freely. Maybe they don't want to say something in front of somebody else because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble, or they don't want that person to hear what it is that they're going to say. So we try to separate people and talk to them in private so that we can get accurate information from those people. If a mother or father or two guardians are having a dispute, they are separated and asked for each of the sides of the story. And typically after we get that information from the parties involved, if I'm working with a partner, we'll kind of stop and discuss with each other and say what solutions we're going to go with. And the outcome of a call really depends on the context of the call and situation, as well as the safety of everybody involved. That is always paramount. We want to make sure that when we're clearing the scene, that we don't have to return, that, you know, there isn't going to be any ongoing issues.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, in terms of if somebody doesn't speak the language, because I've known this happening,
Yes.
and only one of them, let's say the husband in this situation, he's Canadian and all that, and the other person is being sponsored, and she doesn't dominate or fluent in English, and he does the translation. I hope you guys are not doing that anymore.
No, definitely not.
Okay, that's great.
I have a part where I'll touch on if there are language barriers, but I'll just clarify right now that if there is a party on the scene that doesn't speak English, or maybe English isn't their first language, and I can understand as well, under stress, sometimes people find it hard to articulate themselves. And as police, the onus is on us to make sure that we can get proper translation for that person. We have lots of members who are bilingual or multilingual, and we can always call over the radio for either a phone call or that person to attend scene to help translate. And in terms of an official statement, we have a service where that person can come in and have a proper translation with a native speaker of whatever language they speak so that they can be heard accurately.
Okay, thank you. And then a second question too.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any specific procedure when police is called when there is mental health illness in intimate partner violence?
Yes, I will touch on that quickly. So when it comes to somebody going through a mental health crisis and the two people are together, we kind of have to triage one thing at a time. So hypothetically, let's say we go to a call where two people are arguing, it's coming in as a domestic dispute, but one of the parties is very clearly unable to take care of themselves and suffering from a mental illness, they can be sectioned under Section 28 of the Mental Health Act. And so we have very specific parameters that we have to meet if we are going to be sectioning somebody. They have to have a mental illness, be unable to take care of themselves, or be suicidal. So somebody who is saying that they want to take their own life and they have a plan for it, and they, they might have a history as well. We could have the grounds to section that person. And then that procedure would be that we take them to the hospital where they're assessed by a doctor. And then if there's any other criminal code offense, we would take care of that after that person's health has been taken care of.
I see Maria. Maria has a question.
I just wanted to inquire, because you said how domestic violence an outdated term, and you use intimate partner violence. But I remember in several talks that I went to that they advocates and other people said that we should be using gender violence instead, because it's mostly women who get who are the victims of the violence. I wonder if you have something about that.
I can't speak too much to gender violence. I would say we use intimate partner violence because there are just a wide variety of people who make these calls and who can be involved in these calls. And I would say that it's just not like gender violence is not really a term that we use, unfortunately. And because we do deal with calls where it might involve two men in a intimate partner relationship where there's violence. And so in that case, it's, this is a dispute between two men. So I feel that intimate partner violence is just a bit more inclusive to everybody that we're interacting with. And gender violence, saying that is more, women are more susceptible. Women might be more apt to call than men, perhaps. It's kind of, it doesn't really encapsulate all of the people that we interact with, I'd say. I hope that answers your question.
Is it your experience that it is mostly women who are victims of domestic violence or violence at home with partners?
Typically it is, but there are men who are victims as well. And we have to make sure that we account for all the people that could potentially be victims, which is men and women, people in the LGBTQ plus community as well. So, but it does seem to be a vast majority women in my personal experience of taking these calls.
Thank you. Thank you.
Roberta, there is in the chat, somebody says, does these calls to the police affect the criminal record?
So no, it will depend. And I'll talk more about that later. I'm kind of going in chronological order of what happens when you call. But a call to police and our documentation of that call is not a criminal record. So you can only get a criminal record if there is a documented call, there are criminal charges, those charges are put forth to Crown, and that person is convicted of that crime, which is a very long process. But a documented police call, I mean, we document things to make sure that we have history and information, and to document our steps that we take as police. But police attending somebody's home and simply writing a report after, that does not reflect on that person. It's not something employers can access. And it's not considered a criminal history. It would just be more of a record for police to say, okay, this unit went at this date and time, and this was the circumstances of what happened. So it's for our information and documentation to show what steps we took. So it's not necessarily going to mean that they have a criminal record.
Thank you.
No problem.
Another question following that one. How about if you get to somebody's home and the person that is assaulting the partner has no immigration documentation? Do you contact immigration?
If we could contact immigration if they are illegally in Canada or if they don't have any documentation. So it's a possibility, but in that moment, we're going to be concerned about the safety of the victim. And obviously that person who's assaulting is going to be arrested. And whatever information that we have to act on afterwards, we would just have to act on. We don't typically call immigration for every single one of these calls. If this person has some kind of BCID, we'll usually identify them through those means. But if this is an issue where, you know, they're not here in a legal manner, we might call. So it just is going to kind of depend on the circumstance, I'd say.
I'm asking that because I thought that, yes, the police did that before, but they had an agreement that they will not do that. Anyway, so, but.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any kind of agreement with that. So I haven't, let's just say I haven't encountered that before where I've had to do that, but yeah, I can't say we have any policy that says we wouldn't go those avenues if that was something that would come up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the outcome of the call, like I said, it kind of depends on the context of the call and the situation, as well as the safety of everybody involved. So sometimes the solution with these types of calls, if there's no criminal offense, is somebody going and taking a walk, or somebody just leaving the home for the night. If this is a case where two people live together, just somebody going and sleeping somewhere else. Or if this is a case where the people do not live together, one of the parties leaving and just don't talk to each other for 24 hours and let yourselves cool off. So the solution, and that is like a very common solution, is just separate the parties for the day. Tomorrow's a new day and you guys can come back to it and you know, refresh your communication basically. However, it's a more complex calls, especially where there is a criminal offense presence. We must consider our duties under the criminal code as well as conditions ordered by a judge. So there are times when we cannot make exceptions and just separate people, even though that might be the solution that they may want. We do have to act under our duties. And just another point that comes up sometimes as police is, how are we gaining entry into people's homes? There is a common misconception that we will always need a warrant to enter people's houses, and that is simply not true. In these cases, it would be completely tragic outcomes if we had to write a warrant every single time we went into somebody's home, if there's something happening inside, and if somebody's blocking us from entering. So we have common law duties, and one of them is to protect life and property. So if we have reasonable grounds to believe that someone may be in danger, we can enter a residence without a search warrant. Of course, we need to accurately justify this in our report afterwards and take steps to enter the residence with compliance. But if we hear screaming inside of a residence, we can push past somebody and go inside because we have reasonable grounds to believe that somebody's in danger. And for the sake of public safety and to protect life, we have to go inside and ensure that person's okay. It does come up sometimes that we'll come up to a door in these types of calls and someone will say, no, you can't come inside. And we do have a duty to make sure that people are safe inside if we have the reasonable grounds to believe so. So I just wanted to clarify that as well in case anybody had questions as to why police may be able to enter residences at certain times, whereas other times we would write a warrant. All right, and so what if somebody has to be arrested? Having a loved one arrested by police is a very stressful and emotional event for a couple or a family. And we're aware of this and try to take as many steps as possible to minimize the impact on all the parties involved, especially children. Seeing a parent or loved one arrested is very upsetting for them, and it's something that we try to be conscientious of. So how do we identify who to arrest, though? When we come to a situation and people are yelling or it's very chaotic, we have to slow everything down and take steps to identify who is the aggressor in this situation. And we use the term primary aggressor. So that's going to be the person who is the most dominant. And some other factors we consider when we're identifying the primary aggressor is, what is the history and pattern of abuse in the relationship? Who has suffered the most extensive physical or emotional damage? And who has the superior physical strength and skills to effect an assault? So if we show up to a scene and one person, maybe they have some scratches on their hands, but the other person is very clearly injured and bleeding, or you can see red marks on their neck, we're going to be able to identify the primary aggressor quite quickly. And that's another reason why we separate the parties and speak to them separately, because the person who is the victim may disclose more to us and say what has happened in that situation. And then we can decide what charges we have under the criminal code. So if we are attending a domestic dispute and one person is very clearly injured and has been assaulted, we will make an arrest. Or if the victim has told us very specific information and we believe that their safety is at risk, we will make an arrest. Other reasons for arrest would just be with regards to criminal conditions or protection orders. And so I'm just going to take a moment to speak about that, unless anybody has any questions about.
There's more questions. Yes, sorry. And Carmen, you would you like to ask your question? I think you can.
Oh, I was asking you about the agreement you mentioned before, like the immigration and the agreement between the IRCC and the police, because I have no background, so I would like to know a little bit more about that.
I unfortunately just don't have that information. That's not something we've ever been taught, and I'm not aware of any such agreement.
Yeah, so I was wondering what's Marilyn, Marie, what's your information about?
Me? Oh, I'm sorry. I just, I don't really work in the area of immigration, but I know that I've been told many things. I've been working for a long, long time. That sometimes some women don't want to phone the police, right? Because of the partner doesn't have, they're not legally here, etc. And there's dependency issues. And then at some point, they said that in Vancouver, right, they had kind of some kind of agreement that they were not. And you said you don't always phone immigration, so there's like a little bit of flexibility. So, but I don't think there's an agreement per se. I don't know how a police person decide that part when they go to attend the home and they realize that the person doesn't have papers. And I don't know how they do that.
Yeah,
anyway,
I can't say. As far as I know, there's no kind of agreement saying that we won't call immigration. However, I will talk about some barriers that people face in terms of calling police for these types of calls. So I'll definitely be touching on that in a little bit. And if there's no other questions.
Yes, there's another question. I will read it. If the parent have a parenting agreement, but no enforcement order, and the other person does bring back the child in the agreement time, maybe 3 hours later, Is
Mhm.
anything the police can do? Yeah.
No, unfortunately, when it comes to custody agreements that are not police enforceable, there's nothing that we can do as police. That is going to be a civil issue between the parents, and it's very stressful. And I empathize with parents that have these issues with their co-parent. But if somebody is calling police with a custody agreement that is non-enforceable, as long as the child is safe with that other parent, there unfortunately is nothing that we can do.
How do they make it enforceable? I think maybe people need.
I think there would have to be, it would really be up to the judge to make it police enforceable. And I've never come across one of those orders myself personally. I know they do exist, but I think it would be, there would have to be some other kind of criminal element to the situation between the parents to make it enforceable. So unfortunately, I can't speak too much to that because that seems like more of, again, on the civil side. But yeah, police, we wouldn't necessarily be in charge of creating those conditions for parents, if that makes sense. That would all be through a judge. All right. So we'll talk about criminal conditions and protection orders. So typically after we make an arrest, we are going to give the arrested person some conditions that they need to abide by. And judges also can give those conditions and agree or disagree with the conditions that we've given somebody. So these conditions are very important. If the party that's arrested and has those conditions breaches them, they will be arrestable again, and it's just not good for them to be breaching conditions. These conditions are put in place to protect the victim, and common ones include a no contact, either directly or indirectly, as well as a no-go to where they live, work, or happen to be. So communicating either directly or indirectly is not phoning the person, not sending them emails or text messages, but it also means you can't have friends or family trying to contact that person on the arrested person's behalf. That would also be considered a breach of that condition. A protection order is similar and is granted by a judge, and that's something under the Family Law Act. It is a criminal offense for a person to disobey the order and breach it, and that person can be arrestable. So these conditions are all put in place for the safety of the victim. And when I'm using the term victim, that's not meant to be a diminishing or disempowering term. It's really more of a code that we use in our files. Somebody is a victim of crime. And so just as a side note, when I'm saying the term victim, that's kind of what I mean. Not necessarily to say that somebody is weak or disempowered or anything like that. And what if the victim doesn't want to cooperate with police? We do run into that where somebody will be calling 911, we'll get there, things will settle down, but that person doesn't necessarily want to cooperate with us. We usually ask the victim if they wish to provide a statement and proceed with criminal charges. The victim is not obliged to cooperate with us. We don't try to make people give us evidence or give us statements. We do try to talk to them and see if they want to comply with us, but we can't actually make somebody do that. We will still ensure that that person is safe and make a safety plan for them if they don't wish to participate in criminal charges. And just as a side note, in Canada, civilians do not press charges against other people. Police gather the evidence and recommend charges kind of on behalf of that person. It's up to police to make sure that we have the reasonable grounds for a criminal charge to be put forth. We will ask for conditions of a no contact and no go for that person. However, these conditions will really only stay in place if the charges are accepted by Crown, which means they will, if a victim hasn't given us a statement or if we haven't had a chance to gather evidence and we've put forth a file, Crown Counsel will typically get in touch with us and request a statement and further evidence. And typically, depending on the file, if we aren't able to provide that, they will let go of the file, and those conditions of protection may not stay. So they may be gone, and the no contact would no longer be valid. And so just barriers that people may experience. One that we touched on already is language barriers. We at the VPD have many multi-bilingual people who are always willing to come to a call and oblige a request. So we have somebody that speaks Spanish. We have many Spanish-speaking members, Japanese-speaking members, Mandarin and Cantonese-speaking members. And we also have a detailed directory of members that have those language skills. So if you do need somebody for an interview at a later date, you can email somebody and ask them if they're willing to. And we also have a service called Mosaic that we can sit down and do a proper translation with that person. And I just see that somebody has a question: how is the victim notified of the no contact? So we typically go over the conditions at the scene, and we'll explain to the victim and say, hey, these are the, oh, sorry. Let me just see here. Oh, if crown drops, I see.
Oh, yeah, so you can see it. Okay, good.
Yes, I'll keep that up. So typically Crown will contact that victim, or as police, we will contact them and let them know that the charges have been dropped, and that they should be aware that there are no conditions in place for that person. We try to stay in, oh, okay, you had a friend that was never notified. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. And that would be something, the onus on us as police is that we should be keeping in contact with people and making sure that they know that that protection is no longer there. And yeah, that should be the process, is us contacting that person to let them know. And we do get notifications from Crown if the file is not accepted. So we have that information pretty quickly. And just to go back to some barriers, there are cultural barriers, of course. People have varied backgrounds, and they may find it hard to contact police if they're experiencing intimate partner violence. As Marilyn, you touched on before, somebody, a spouse or a loved one that is in trouble with police, they may not be here legally, or there's just some other aspect, or they depend on their partner's income, and now they may lose their job because they've been to jail and they've missed work. All of those things are considered. Of course, we have to act as police for the criminal code and for the safety of that victim, but we do understand that those can be barriers for people calling police. People also can fear and mistrust police. Some families may be wary of calling police. It may jeopardize their citizenship or ability to study in Canada. That is a fear that comes up for a lot of people, that if they have police contact, they're here on a student visa and they may not want to participate or report to police because they don't want to lose their student visa. Or they don't want a police file associated with their name at all, which is understandable. They may have also had a previous negative experience with police and don't want to participate with a police investigation due to how they may have been treated in the past. And so that onus is on us as police to go into these situations as unbiased as possible and as culturally sensitive as possible, and make sure that we are treating people with respect and that we are understanding of the circumstances while still acting within our duties. And what if there are children present? So children being present is another urgent concern while we're going to the call. The ages of the children are taken into consideration, as well as past police contact. Police arriving and being inside the house can be a really scary situation for the children, and it's something that we keep in mind. So we try to speak with the children and confirm their safety, and make sure that they're not injured either. And if a parent or a relative is being arrested, we do try to do this in a tactful way so that the children either aren't watching, their loved one being handcuffed. And of course, depending on the situation, we try to let the arrested party say goodbye to that parent if it's appropriate. Sometimes that is not possible just due to safety. or we'll try to remove that parent, caregiver, relative with the child being in another room so they're not watching that. And so what about the aftermath after the arrest? What other steps are we having to take as police? We create a safety plan for the victim and ensure they have proper resources. So if the victim needs to go to the hospital, we will facilitate that by either calling for paramedics or transporting them ourselves. If they don't have a phone, we can get them a 911 prefix phone for free from the police, so that at least they have the ability to call 911. Other investigative steps, we may need photos of injuries. We may need to take photos of any other evidence. If there is, say, blood on the accused hands, we might take swabs of that. We might have to seize clothing. Obtaining a safe kit in the case of a sexual assault, obtaining any other witness statements, or obtaining CCTV if there is footage available of the incident. So there is still investigative steps we have to take after and evidence gathering, but the most paramount thing when we are going to these calls and the aftermath is just making sure that the victim is safe and that when we leave, they're after this incident feeling as safe as possible. And one of the other things that Marilyn, you wanted me to touch on was the options for both the accused and the victims after everything's all settled and done. The victim and family may be concerned for the well-being of the accused, whoever's been taken to jail, and especially if that person's going to be spending the night in jail, which is understandable. I used to work in the Vancouver jail, and it is not an unsafe place to be, but it's definitely not a place that you want to spend the night. It can be very stressful, especially if somebody's never been arrested before. But it is a one person per cell. And when you're taken into the jail, you're provided a lawyer call, you are provided food, a bed, a blanket, and whoever's been arrested, they will have a chance to speak with a judge through a video call. And typically people are released after that. No one can be held for longer than 24 hours at our jail. It is illegal to keep anybody longer. So typically upon being released from the jail, that person will be given conditions from that judge. And if they have personal effects at the residence where the incident happened, they can give police a call and we can facilitate them getting some of their belongings back. The victim is usually referred to the Vancouver Police Victim Services, which is a civilian unit who can provide resources to anybody who is a victim of crime. And they have a lot of really great supports and resources that that person can be given and hopefully help them get through this situation.
I just have I see somebody commented, I guess, about dropping the charges if the police, drop, that the victim was never notified. That's one comment. And then I have another, okay, if you want to comment about that.
Oh, yes, I saw Nicole's comment and addressed that. Just that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if it's dropped, then we should be notifying that person and just letting them know. And that is something that we have to keep on top of for sure.
Yeah, but sometimes it doesn't happen, right?
Sometimes it can. And yeah, there should be a notification from either us or from Crown. So that is something that we have to stay conscientious of.
Okay.
And the last thing that I just want to touch upon is just about calling the ministry. We do have certain policies in place that if we go to a call and there are children present, we typically give MCFD a call. So police calling MCFD, that can be really stressful for a family and or the guardian. It is not meant to be a punitive call. It is not meant for police to have children removed from the home. That is not the purpose of the call. And we typically will explain to whoever is the guardian of the children, the parents, whoever, and say, hey, we have to make this call. You can expect a call from a social worker from MCFD, but that this is not that we're reporting them to have their kids taken away. That is not what we do. The purpose is so that the ministry is just aware if there's any issues, and to contact the adult who has custody of the children and offer support. So when we make this call to MCFD, we typically say, here are the children, here's the situation that happened, why police had to be called, and the circumstances, and here's what we think that guardian might need. That the guardian is saying they're struggling with X, Y, and Z, and perhaps that would be something for the ministry to talk to them about. So MCFD will be able to speak to a little bit more of what it is they do and the steps that they take, because I can't really speak to that too much, but police typically do not remove children from the home unless there's a very clear risk to their safety and they're in danger of immediate harm. It has to be, there's no guardian to take care of them, or one person is just in a situation where they can't take care of their children. And we usually make every effort to contact a family member to take the children before they're taken anywhere. I've never had a situation where I've had to remove children from a home, but I have had situations where we've called a grandparent or an aunt or just some other kind of guardian to come over and help look after a child. But this was kind of due to different circumstances, but there's usually somebody who can come by and take care of the children. So yeah, it has to be immediate danger to that child's life that they be removed. So it's a very, very rare occurrence that a child would have to be removed from the home. And so what happens next after all of these steps? The accused is released from jail, and the onus will be upon them to adhere to their conditions and appear to any upcoming court dates. So usually there's a court date set for the future for that person to show up to. And the courts are then in touch with the victim and will inform them of the next steps as well.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I have one more question.
Yes, of course. Any questions? Of course.
And if anybody else has more questions, please. So one situation, the mom did not speak English, and the spouse was Canadian born and spoke English.
Yeah.
And she was the one that got out of the house and asked the neighbor to phone the police.
Okay.
Police. She was already distressed, and then the police was called, and then the police, they came, but she couldn't speak English, right? And plus, you know, when you're nervous, you know, you're in fight, flight, freeze, you cannot think, you cannot less English, right? And then the sergeant, I guess, because there were 3 police, and one was a sergeant and 2 constables. The sergeant interviewed her, and she said that she didn't speak English, but no translation was offered at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So what she decided, because she was holding her baby and she was just crying, she was upset probably too, because she phoned the police, and then she decided to say yes to everything, like whatever the sergeant asked, she said yes. That was she spoke Spanish, and she thought that was kind of a respectful way of answering the police person. Just say yes. But she said, I don't speak English. And anyways, just to make it short, that went through a lot. Between, we made a complaint, you know, to saying this is what happened. And all what she wanted was an apology, and for the record that the record was on her now. It was not on the partner.
Okay.
Because he said she had done something, and yeah. So anyway, do they, because that's what I learned, you know, I didn't know before, that records are not erasable, they stay there forever. Is that the case if somebody you know, get charged, and the charges were dropped also?
Okay.
Yeah, they were dropped. And do the record get erased from the police? That's the question.
Okay, so in this circumstance, anything that was explained to her, it should have been explained to her in Spanish, especially if her charter rights were being read to her. It is you have to understand what you're being read and why you're being arrested. That's just a basic right here in Canada. And so in terms of the criminal record being erased, so if the charges are dropped, there's no criminal record at all. So criminal convictions are only, and a criminal record are only for convictions, like criminal charges that have been convicted where you have been found guilty by a judge. And so if a file, like police can put forth charges on somebody, and then once we hand that file off to Crown, it's up to them to proceed and for it to go to trial and for a judge to say that person is guilty or not guilty. And so being arrested doesn't mean that you have a criminal record. It's only if that charge is convicted by a judge.
Okay, so that record is erased for sure. Okay.
So it's not necessarily that the record is erased. We can still see that file as police. But in terms of actually having a criminal record that you can see, like if you do a background check, that will not appear. And I just see Nicole's question here. Is there any way to look up charges even if they were dropped? I believe the only charges that you as civilians can see are ones that have been convicted. So only police have access to reading previous files about people. It's on our system. And that's really just for information. And can the person charge request? I believe you can request files through the Freedom of Information Act. I'm not sure about ones where they are criminal convictions. I can't really speak to that. I'm not sure. But let's say the police attended your residence and there was some kind of dispute and there's documentation afterwards. You can request the report through the Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah, and you get that in the police station, right? You just go and get it.
So I think there's an application you can make on our website at vpd.ca, and there's some process. You just need the file number and you put in your request, and then I believe you can get the records.
Yes. Any other questions?
Yeah, okay.
Ping has a question. Ping Chu?
Okay. Yes, I have a question. One is regarding cultural difference. For especially in parenting, some countries seems okay to have a physical punishment, but here it's not. So especially for new immigrants, they may not know this. So how do you deal with this kind of situation?
Yeah, so that can be very complex because, you know, when you're living in Canada, we have the criminal code and there's that expectation that people will adhere to the criminal code. But we also understand too, people are new. And like you said, there are cultural differences. And that is going to be on a case-by-case basis. Maybe we can go to a home where, you know, people are having a dispute and we can explain to them and say, hey, what you're doing is a criminal offense, or you could be criminally charged for doing this, just so you're aware. But in other cases where, say, a spouse is hitting another spouse or a child is being hit and it's putting that child's safety at risk, we would have to act upon that and do something about it, just because we can't walk away regardless if there's a cultural difference. So it would be something that we would have to do our best to try to explain first. But if there's a very clear risk to someone's safety, we would have to act. And yeah, so that would be a good case to have somebody who is a speaker of that person's native language coming in and explaining why they can't do this, and maybe try to get some supports for that person through MCFD so that there's a little bit more understanding and no further issues.
And the ministry will come after Roberta, so there's a chance to ask them, okay, how do you deal with that?
For sure.
Yeah, right. So
okay, I have another question. If two children fight, say, outside, maybe in the park or in the playground, and can parents feel strongly, can they file a police record, Or is there any, I know some parents was saying, oh, it's not fair to my child get hurt, so I'm going to report to the police. How the police deal with this kind of thing?
Yeah, so that's going to be more of a youth justice situation. I can speak to that a little bit. I'm not an expert on youth files, but typically youth files are dealt with a little bit differently because they're not adults. And so sometimes kids fight. But if it's an instant where there's a serious assault happening, you can call police and file a report, but it'll typically be dealt with by a student liaison officer, or we also have a youth car, the Yankee 10 car. And it's very rare for a youth to be charged criminally. Normally they're given conditions or just other remedies that aren't criminal charges because people are so young, and there's just other ways of dealing with these types of situations with youths. It's all going to depend on the circumstance, but typically if police are called, we end up speaking to the kids and the parents, and even if there are charges that are put forth, it's normally just kind of like no contact condition. So if you wanted to talk to a student liaison officer, you'd probably get a better answer from them because they're dealing with youths all the time. So that might be a kind of another presenter that you guys could think about having is a student liaison officer or a youth call, because they'll be able to answer that a little bit more than I can.
Okay, and another question, sorry. You were talking about when you're talking about domestic violence and there's a peace bond, the will contact order, but what's happened for the victim contact so-called offender? Like
We usually discourage the victim from contacting the offender. But in that case, the onus is still on the offender not to talk to that person.
okay.
So yeah, we would usually advise the victim, hey, unless it's some kind of case where they need to communicate for childcare or something. But if the victim's just messaging the person casually, we really discourage that. But at the end of the day, the onus is on the accused to not answer that and not talk to them.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Robert, I have a question, comment. First of all, thank you for your work.
Oh, thank
And
you.
it seems that sometimes it could be very demanding and very stressful. So I am wondering if you think that there are some things that you need in your work that could improve the way that you deliver your work. I'm not saying that it's not good. I'm just saying that it's something that can help you to improve the way that you output your work.
Oh, that's a tough question. Sometimes it's just our resources on the road. If we're short-staffed, it can make it a little bit more complicated. I'd have to really think about that. I would say, like, as Vancouver Police, we're pretty well equipped and we get really great training, and we have a lot of cultural and trauma-informed practice training that we cover pretty regularly every year. So I would say in terms of preparation, especially when it comes to dealing with these types of calls, we have a lot of resources and we have a lot of training. And our domestic violence unit, they are also really good at keeping us informed about best practices for these types of calls. So I can't really think off the top of my head right now, but I'm sure if I thought about it, I could think of something. But
Okay, thank you.
No, but it's great to hear that you're trauma informed, and that is I wonder how you deal with that. If you know the whole society is traumatized one way or another, right? It's like, yeah, I can't even imagine. And they're all we all are acting out our own traumas.
yes, and that's something that we take into account, is that people have their own experiences, and so you just have to meet people where they're at sometimes, and not take things personally as well. So you kind of have to make sure that you're keeping your own mind and just dealing with each situation as it is. And I see somebody has a question here. Just curious, the CSO website public can access the individual is still in custody or more information is needed, but the charges have dropped. So I believe the CSO is just for convictions. I can't really speak to that too much, but I know that you can check people on the CSO website for convictions for sure. Them being in custody, I don't think so, because if the person has just been arrested by police, they haven't actually been found guilty of that crime. So I would say they probably wouldn't be.
That's good. And yeah, yes, Carmen. Carmen?
So I have a question. So if the charges have been dropped and incidents happen like again and again, but like a couple times you have raised some charges, but then dropped again, not established. So if like maybe the fourth or fifth time, and maybe it's really becomes a little bit more serious, and then if there would be any possibility that the old drop charges be bring back again on table. Yeah, if it's like consistently happening, so it might be something that might be established one day. So when that day was established, like if that means the past, yeah, the scenarios before, would it be like bring it on table again as a record?
So previous charges that have been dropped wouldn't necessarily be brought back because they were basically unsubstantiated. So I would say if it seems like we are getting called to a residence or situations between two people really regularly, this may alert our domestic violence unit and they might be able to take some additional steps. But just in terms of like somebody on patrol, if somebody doesn't want to participate or if charges keep getting dropped, there's not really that much we can do. It would kind of just depend on the circumstance, and we kind of have to address those situations as best we can. If charges are being dropped because one person is recanting, then we just kind of have to deal with that situation as it is. And sometimes things can eventually go to charges, but it just depends on how people want to participate, unfortunately. And it's kind of one of those barriers where people have complex relationships, and it's, we have to kind of just take that as it is. And some people want to participate and then they may change their mind. So it's just, that's just an unfortunate thing that we have to deal with.
All right. Any more questions? I can see that we have Kim from the Ministry of Children and Family here, and Roberta, you are welcome to stay. People might have a question that have to do with MCFD and the police.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Unfortunately, I have to get ready to go to work now, but I just wanted to thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated having this opportunity to talk about these types of calls and our procedures as police. And I hope this clarifies some things from the police side as the steps that we have to take. So thank you so much again. It's been really lovely meeting and speaking with you all. And if you do have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Marilyn, you have my email. And if you do have any further questions, by all means, shoot me an email and I'll do my best to give you the answers that you need.
All right. So if people have questions, they can send it to us and then we'll send it to you.
Perfect. Yeah, that's no problem.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really wanted to know more about you, but it's okay. It's okay. Time ran out. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So thank you, Roberta. And just for the people, just to let you know that Roberta kindly has some slides for us. So we are going to be able to share those slides with you guys. Thank you, Roberta.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jesus.
Have a good day.
Bye. Thank you. Have a good day as well. Bye.
And now, so I don't know if any people want to take a little break or we just continue